Hey, it's Concrete. This is the sixth in my series of Flavorah beta testing videos. Again, you can see the disclaimer, yada yada, I didn't pay for anything. Today I have their Oak Barrel, I have their Brulee, and I have their Lembas Bread, which, all interesting flavors, so we'll give it a shot. Starting out, I do have their Oak Barrel. So, right off the bat, this is not a single flavor. This is definitely an additive. It's another one that doesn't actually have its own distinct body to it. When I first mixed up testers for this, I had one all the way up. I went 0.25%, 1%, and 3%. And there isn't a body to it. It kind of just tasted like smelling hardwood without like any kind of body. So it's definitely an additive. It is an uncharred oak additive, and when I say oak, it's that kind of hardwood flavor. There's nothing like resinous and piney here. There's no like cedar or sandalwood or particularly aromatic, and it's definitely not charred. It's just like straight oak. But using it as an additive, so what it tends to do is it adds a little bit of sort of dry astringency to juices. This isn't the first just straight up oak flavor on the market. TPA has their red oak flavor, and then Flavorah has their oakwood flavor. And I did a really brief comparison. I actually went ahead and mixed them all side by side and tested them out. So out of all of those three, this one has probably the least body. There is no real body to it. Both TPA's red oak and oakwood have at least a little bit of body there. This is just pretty much that sort of oak flavor, and that sort of additive, that astringent additive without any sort of baggage along with it. TPA's red oak has like a little bit of a coconut note to it too, which this doesn't. And then FA's oakwood gets a little bit sour for me. It tends to work really well in mixes, but that aren't necessarily tobacco mix. But when you start mixing it with tobacco, it gets a little sour and watery. So in terms of where you'd want to use it, like I said, tobacco mixes are one thing. It's going to work a lot like oakwood or red oak in those tobacco mixes, but it's a little bit cleaner. It doesn't have any baggage with it. With some of the other oaks, you can kind of play around a little bit more. I've seen custards made with like red oak or oak wood, and I don't necessarily think this is going to be the right choice for those kind of like dessert applications that need like a little bit of smokiness or presence to them. This doesn't have anything that tastes even remotely charred. It's just like raw, straight oak. It's definitely an additive. If you do want just that straight charred oak flavor, Flavorah's bourbon, while I don't get like a lot of bourbon body to it, it does have a fantastic charred oak note. Outside of tobaccos, I think the other big use case for it is going to be in sort of cocktail vapes. Taking like a sweeter wine flavor, which I did with their sangria, it actually sort of takes the red wine note that I get there and moves it away from something that's a little bit flatter and a little bit sweeter, kind of like a bad Merlot or whatever. And it kind of brings it closer to something like a Cabernet that actually has, some astringency and a little bit more body and depth to it. And I could see using it with like wine or like champagne vapes, that kind of stuff, to add that kind of like wine oak back to things. It isn't quite a bourbon oak, just because it's not charred, but I did go ahead and use it with some TPA's Kentucky bourbon. And while it was interesting, I don't think it really did a better job of capturing bourbon, so I'd probably stick away from, bourbon or whatever. But that astringency and that dryness tends to kind of pop booze flavors a little bit. So I think in other cocktails, if you use it a low percentage, it should actually kind of help sell the cocktail thing pretty well without bringing in any additional body or flavor like the other available oaks. It's definitely interesting. It's strong. It's definitely strong. I would start low and work up with this one. 0.25% gave me a lot of what I was looking for from the flavor, especially mixed with like sangria. But I wouldn't go much higher than like 0.5% with it. It's again, it's a specialized flavor, and I think if you only need one oak in your life and you already have one, I'm not necessarily sure it's going to be first on your list for anything, but if you do already like those kind of like woody, weird additives and some more interesting complex flavors, I think this brings enough separately to the table from red oak and oak wood that it's probably worth picking up. So next I have their Brulee flavor. This one's really interesting to me. So when they say brulee, I was initially thinking that it was just going to be like that caramelized sugar note, but it feels like there's more going on here than that. It definitely feels like it's more of like a attempt at a creme brulee, because there is like a little bit of a custard or a cream underneath it. The caramelized sugar note itself doesn't really taste burnt, which would be an easy trap to kind of fall into with a brulee flavor. I'd actually even say the actual caramelization note here is a little bit lighter than Flavorah straight caramel or like Flavor Arts caramel. Both of those are very, very dark caramels. This is definitely caramelized, but it's not to that level of burnt that those other caramels are. The custard note, while it's there, is definitely light. It feels like it needs a little bit of help. I do get like some custard presence and some mouthfeel and a little bit of vanilla, but it really feels like it needs something to come in and sort of fill out that custard lower end on there. I was messing around with this and a Aware custard together, and it actually worked out pretty well in general, but I feel like you need something richer and heavier and sort of eggy to fill in that bottom end. The big place where this flavor doesn't work for me is there's like a fluffiness to this, which doesn't really fit either the richer custard base or that sort of caramelized sugar note. It just kind of detracts from the profile a little bit. It almost feels like somebody put like a Rice Krispie flavor in the middle of there, because you get like some fluffy, not particularly aggressive flavored texture, and it kind of bleeds over and softens up everything, which isn't really quite working for me there. I mean, with that said, I think you could use this flavor, but I think you're going to be doing a little bit of damage control if you want to do a creme brulee. For a creme brulee, and you want to use this flavor, I'd feel like it's probably necessary to add like that darker, drier caramel back in there, and add like a richer custard. I think that you could use this as sort of a bridge flavor to tie those together. But ultimately, when you're doing that much work on a flavor, you get to the point where you're questioning whether or not you need to actually add it. I think that you could kind of play with that cereal texture. I think that you could do some really interesting things with this in cereal vapes, sort of assuming that you're going to have that cereal texture, and then use this for like some darker roastier notes on the cereal, and then that cream, that sort of light custard base or whatever is going to blend into whatever cream you're using with your cereal. So I think it could fit in there, be a little bit specialized. I could also see it working for kind of a different route to get to a toasted marshmallow. So TPA and Flavor West both have a toasted marshmallow flavor that their flavors are a little weird. I wouldn't necessarily say either of them actually taste like a toasted marshmallow. I think you could take a fluffier marshmallow concentrate and use some of this and kind of get closer to something that actually tastes like a toasted marshmallow. In terms of percentage, it's a little tricky. I find that this gets a little bit cardboardy from all that like sort of undefined cereal texture. Especially as you start to increase the percentages. And then there's a little bit of tartness in this flavor too, which interacts with the caramel in a strange way. I'd probably top out about 1.5% for this flavor. So I'm not sure where this fits in the grand scheme of things. I think there'll be some use for this, but I don't think it's a single flavor like creme brulee concentrate. Okay, so last for today, I have their Lembas Bread, which apparently is a Lord of the Rings thing. It's something that elves made or something. I don't, whatever. That's fine. That's fine. Name your flavors whatever you want. That's fine. So, not knowing 100% what Lembas bread is supposed to taste like, to me this tastes a lot like the base for a fruit muffin. It definitely has like a very muffin, it definitely has like a muffin thing going on here. It has that kind of like softer, grainier texture. It's a little bit fluffy. It's a lot like a more savory version of almost like a cupcake or a yellow cake texture. It doesn't have that same level of sweetness though, and there's no frosting note. For whatever it's worth, whatever combination of flavorings they use, you kind of have that distinct muffinish taste, and this definitely has that kind of like yellow muffiny taste to it, which is really interesting. There is something a little fruity in here, which I'm not 100% sure what it's supposed to be, but I feel like it's pretty subtle. I think you can take it in a couple different directions. Almost tastes like a blueberry, but again, it's not like overwhelmingly blueberry-ish. I think it would work as sort of an attachment point for a lot of different fruit flavors. And like, I don't see anything with like a semi-tart component really not fitting here. I think you could hang a bunch of berries off of it. I think it would work well with apples and stuff like that. I think you might run into a little bit too much fruitiness for something like a banana nut muffin, but I think it's probably worth a shot because this is a really solid muffin base. In terms of off flavors, I think at lower percentages, there's a lot of texture here and there isn't like necessarily a strong flavor. So at lower percentages, I do get a little bit of like a cardboardy underflavored taste. And then as you start to crank it up, you start to notice there's a little bit of almost like an anise note attached to that tartar fruit note. It's nowhere near as prominent as Capella's Yellow Cake for me, but it's sort of in that same family. Although I think that if you keep this around 2%, it's fairly well flavored and it's not going to run into that weird sort of muddled anise thing. I do feel like this could use just a little bit of a boost. I think it does distinctly taste like a muffin, but I think you could probably stand just a little bit more texture in there. I would look at maybe like TPA's Vanilla Cupcake, which I think has less frosting than Capella's, but I think you could use Capella in a pinch just because it's probably going to be a sweeter mix anyway. You could also use like Flavorah's Pound Cake or something to go ahead and add some more sort of cakey taste without necessarily messing with the texture too much. But yeah, like throw a bunch of fruit at it. It feels a lot like the other half of Flavorah's blueberry muffin flavor, which is a really good cooked blueberry flavor, but there isn't much muffin there. This feels like the missing half of this flavor that they like found somewhere. It's really interesting. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised with that one. There's really not a good sort of muffin base that I've tasted before. And so this is definitely new and sort of interesting. This one I really liked. But, yeah, hope that helps if you're looking at these flavors. Again, they'll be available October 6th through Bull City and Nicotine River. Yeah, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. I'll catch you later.